Story 1. It was a fresh start, or so I told myself, a place where I could rebuild our lives after the tragedy. My daughter, Lily, was the reason I kept going, even though my heart still ached from losing my wife. The house was for her, a new beginning. "Do you like it, Lily?" I asked, trying to sound upbeat as I unlocked the front door. Lily clutched her stuffed rabbit and peered inside the dark hallway. "It's big," she said, her voice small, almost lost in the cavernous space. "Yeah, it is," I said, forcing a smile. "You'll have lots of room to play." She nodded, but her eyes stayed glued to the floor. I wished she would show a bit of excitement, but I understood. The past year had been hard on her, and moving to a strange new house wasn't exactly what a 7-year-old needed to cheer up. But it was all I could do. We needed to leave the memories of the old place behind. As we unpacked, I noticed Lily gravitating toward a small, dusty room at the end of the hall. The door creaked when she pushed it open, revealing an old nursery with peeling wallpaper and a single rocking chair in the corner. I hadn't even realized this room was here. "Dad, look." Lily's voice suddenly had a spark of excitement as she pointed to a doll sitting in the middle of the floor. It was an old-fashioned porcelain doll with long dark hair and a lace dress, her painted eyes staring blankly ahead. I hesitated. The doll looked antique, almost out of place in this forgotten room. But Lily was already reaching for it, her face lighting up for the first time in weeks. "Can I keep her, Dad?" she asked, cradling the doll in her arms. "Sure, sweetheart," I said, though something about the doll made me uneasy. "But make sure to be careful with her, okay? She's probably very fragile." Lily nodded, already lost in her own world, whispering to the doll as if they were old friends. Days passed, and I noticed Lily spending more and more time in that little room. Whenever I walked by, I'd hear her talking to the doll, her voice low and conspiratorial. I didn't think much of it at first. Imaginary friends were common at her age, and if it helped her cope, I wasn't going to stop her. One evening, after tucking Lily into bed, I decided to ask her about it. "Lily, what do you and the doll talk about?" I asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. Lily looked at me with those big brown eyes that always reminded me of her mother. "We talk about all sorts of things," she said. "She tells me stories." "Oh? What kind of stories?" "About you and Mommy." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "What about me and Mommy?" Lily hesitated, glancing at the doll on her bedside table. She told me about the day Mommy went away. My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "She told me that Mommy was scared, that she didn't want to leave us. But then she saw a man, and he told her to follow him. And then she wasn't scared anymore." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Lily had never asked about the details of her mother's death. I had always thought she was too young to understand, so I hadn't told her anything beyond the fact that Mommy wasn't coming back. "Lily, who told you that?" I asked, my voice trembling. She looked at the doll again. "She did." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Lily, that's not something the doll can know. Did you hear someone else talking about it?" "No," Lily insisted, her grip tightening on the doll. "She told me. She knows everything, Daddy." A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. "Lily, that's enough for tonight. Put the doll down and go to sleep, okay?" Lily pouted but did as I asked. I kissed her goodnight, but as I turned off the light, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying Lily's words over and over. How could she know about that day? About how her mother had been scared, about the strange man she had mentioned in her final moments? No one knew those details, no one but me and the doctor who was with her. The next morning, I decided to take the doll away. I didn't care how upset Lily would be. Something about it was wrong, and I wasn't going to take any chances. When I walked into Lily's room, I found her sitting on the floor, the doll in her lap. "Lily, I need to take the doll," I said, trying to sound firm. Lily looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "No, Daddy. She doesn't want to go." I reached for the doll, but Lily clutched it tightly to her chest. "Please, Daddy. She'll be lonely without me." "Lily, it's just a doll." "She can't feel lonely," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. "She can, Daddy," Lily whispered. "She told me." I froze. The way Lily was talking, it was as if she really believed the doll was alive. My heart pounded in my chest. "Lily, I'm taking the doll, and that's final." As I pried the doll from Lily's hands, she started to cry, a low, pitiful wail that sent shivers down my spine. I hurried out of the room, the doll clutched in my hand, and made my way to the basement. I shoved the doll into an old chest and locked it. That night, Lily refused to speak to me. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't come out of her room. I felt like the worst father in the world, but I knew I had to keep that doll away from her. It was around midnight when I heard the whispering. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but as I lay there in the darkness, I realized the sound was coming from inside the house. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The whispers were faint but unmistakable, like a soft voice murmuring just beyond the edge of my hearing. I got up, my heart pounding in my chest, and followed the sound down the hallway. It led me to the basement door. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. I didn't want to open it, but I had to know. As I descended the creaky stairs, the whispers grew louder. They were coming from the chest where I had locked the doll. I hesitated, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. This was impossible. It had to be a trick of the mind, a hallucination born from grief and stress. But when I opened the chest, the doll was gone. A chill ran down my spine as I felt a presence behind me. I spun around and there she was, Lily, standing at the top of the stairs, the doll in her arms staring at me with cold, lifeless eyes. "She doesn't want to leave, Daddy," she said, her voice a hollow echo. "And she's never going to." The last thing I saw was the doll's painted smile, growing wider as the darkness swallowed me whole.
Story 2. My daughter, Emily, had been my entire world. After she died, the world lost its color. The house was too quiet, too empty. I would have done anything to hear her voice again, to feel her presence. That's why, when I heard about Madame Iris, a medium who could supposedly communicate with the dead, I didn't hesitate. I needed to know if Emily was okay, if she had found peace. Or maybe, selfishly, I just wanted to keep her with me a little longer. The medium's parlor was in a rundown part of town, far from the pristine suburb I was used to. The place was dimly lit, filled with the smell of incense and something else I couldn't quite place, something earthy like damp soil. Madame Iris was an older woman, with long gray hair and eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. She didn't offer me any comfort, just a brief nod as I explained why I was there. Her expression was all business. "To connect with your daughter's spirit, I need something personal of hers," she said, her voice low and raspy. Something that held significance. I had anticipated this. I reached into my bag and pulled out Emily's favorite doll. It was a small, soft doll with blonde yarn hair and a blue dress. She'd carried it everywhere, even to the hospital. Holding it now, my chest tightened. I missed her so much it hurt. Madame Iris took the doll from me, her fingers brushing against mine. Her touch was cold, sending a shiver up my spine. "This will do," she said, her eyes narrowing as she examined the doll. "Wait here." She retreated into another room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. I stared at the flickering candle on the table, trying to push away the doubts creeping into my mind. What if this was all a scam? What if she was just taking advantage of my grief? But then I heard a soft voice, Emily's voice. "Mommy." My heart nearly stopped. I turned, and there she was, standing beside Madame Iris, looking just as she had before she fell ill. Her blonde hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and she wore her favorite pink dress. She looked so real, so solid, I wanted to reach out and hug her, but something held me back. "Emily," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Is it really you?" She nodded, her eyes wide and innocent. "I miss you, Mommy." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I miss you too, sweetheart. Every day." Madame Iris stood behind her, watching silently. There was something in her gaze that made me uneasy, but I was too focused on Emily to care. Are you okay? Are you happy?" I asked, desperate for answers. Emily's face fell. "It's cold where I am, Mommy. I'm scared." Her words sliced through me like a knife. "Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. I wish I could be with you." She took a step closer, her small hand reaching out to me. "You can, Mommy. You can come with me." A chill crept over me. Something wasn't right. The way she said it, there was an edge to her voice that didn't sound like my Emily. I glanced at Madame Iris, but she remained silent, her eyes fixed on me. "Emily, where are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm waiting for you, Mommy," she said, a smile spreading across her face. But it wasn't a child's smile, it was too wide, too unnatural. I felt a surge of panic. This wasn't right. This wasn't my daughter. I need to go," I stammered, backing away. "I'm sorry, Emily, I love you, but I can't stay." Madame Iris stepped forward, her eyes darkening. "It's too late, Joanne. She's already here." Before I could react, Emily's form began to shimmer and fade, dissolving into the air like mist. The room grew colder, the shadows deepening. I turned to run, but my legs felt like lead. As I stumbled out of the parlor, I clutched the doll to my chest. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. What had I seen? Was it really Emily or something else? Something darker? When I got home, the house was even colder than usual. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of something unseen lurking in the corners. I set the doll down on the kitchen table and tried to calm my racing heart. But then I noticed something strange. The doll's eyes, they were no longer the bright blue they had been before. They were pitch black, as if they had been filled with ink. "Must be a trick of the light," I muttered to myself, trying to brush it off. I was tired, shaken. I just needed to rest. But rest didn't come easily that night. I kept hearing faint whispers like the wind, but more sinister. The house creaked and groaned, the shadows seeming to twist and writhe on the walls. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face, that unnatural smile. The next morning, I found the doll in the living room, even though I was sure I'd left it in the kitchen. Its black eyes seemed to follow me as I moved around the house, a creeping dread settling in my stomach. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that I was just imagining things. But then I saw it. The doll's head was moving, slowly but unmistakably turning as if searching for something. For me. "No," I whispered, backing away. "This isn't real. It can't be real." But the doll kept turning its head, the motion becoming faster and faster, until it was spinning in circles, the black eyes a blur. The air around me grew heavy, oppressive. I could feel something malevolent in the room, something that shouldn't be there. Desperation clawed at me. I grabbed the doll, intending to throw it away, but the moment my fingers touched it, I felt a searing pain shoot up my arm. I screamed and dropped it, the doll landing on the floor with a thud. "What do you want?" I cried out, my voice echoing in the empty house. The doll lay still, but the air was thick with a sense of malevolence. I could hear whispers, low and guttural, coming from all around me. I backed into the corner, clutching my throbbing hand. In the midst of my panic, I realized the truth. Whatever had been summoned in that seance, it wasn't my daughter. It was something else, something evil that had attached itself to the doll. I couldn't stay in the house any longer. I had to get rid of it, get as far away as possible. I grabbed the doll, ignoring the burning pain that shot through me, and ran out to the backyard. There, I dug a hole in the hard earth, my hands trembling, and buried the doll as deep as I could. But as I covered the hole with dirt, I heard a faint giggle, Emily's giggle, echoing in the wind. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. "Mommy, come play with me." The voice was coming from the ground, muffled but unmistakable. I stumbled back, terror seizing me. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't stay in this house. I ran inside, grabbed my keys, and drove away, not caring where I was going as long as it was far from that place. But no matter how far I go, I can still hear her. I can still hear Emily's voice, calling to me, begging me to come back. And I know deep down that whatever is in that doll, whatever I let into our lives, it's not done with me yet.
Story 3. At 42, I was living alone in a small, dingy apartment, working long hours at the locksmith shop, and coming home to nothing but the flickering light of the television. The nights were the hardest, lonely, quiet nights where the silence was so thick you could almost choke on it. I tried not to think about what I'd missed out on, the family I never had, the relationships that never materialized. It was on one of those endless nights when I stumbled across her. Ruby. I was scrolling through eBay, half asleep, searching for something, anything, to distract me from the emptiness. That's when I saw her. A life-size doll, so realistic it took my breath away. She had long auburn hair, piercing blue eyes, and a body that looked like it was sculpted by a master artist. The description said she was the size of a 20-year-old woman, a model-like beauty who was perfect in every way. I didn't know what came over me, but I had to have her. It wasn't just her looks, there was something about her, something that called to me in a way nothing else had in years. I placed the bid, heart pounding in my chest, and waited. The next day, she was mine. When the delivery truck pulled up, I could barely contain my excitement. The driver gave me a strange look as he helped me carry the large box up to my apartment, but I didn't care. All that mattered was getting Ruby out of that box and into my home. She was even more stunning in person, her skin soft to the touch, her eyes so lifelike they seemed to follow me wherever I went. I dressed her in a silk nightgown I'd ordered just for her, brushed her hair, and set her gently on the couch. "There you are, Ruby," I whispered, feeling a strange warmth in my chest. "You're home now." At first, I only talked to her occasionally, in the way you might talk to a pet. But as days turned into weeks, I found myself confiding in her more and more. I'd tell her about my day at work, about the annoying customers or the difficult locks I had to pick. I'd tell her about my dreams, my regrets, all the things I kept bottled up inside. Ruby never judged, never interrupted, she just listened. And then, as if by magic, the loneliness began to fade. I wasn't alone anymore, I had Ruby. She was there for me when I woke up in the morning, and she was there for me when I came home at night. She was always there, always beautiful, always perfect. One day though, something changed. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was closing up the shop when a woman walked in. Her name was Sarah. She was looking to get a copy of her house keys made, and we struck up a conversation while I worked on them. She was funny, kind, and had a smile that made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of hope. "Maybe we could grab a coffee sometime," I suggested, my voice shaky with nerves. She smiled, a real warm smile that reached her eyes. "I'd like that, Dennis." We started seeing each other, and for the first time in years, I felt like my life was moving forward. Sarah was everything I'd ever wanted, a real, flesh and blood woman who actually cared about me. But every time I came home from our dates, there was Ruby, sitting in the same spot on the couch, her glassy eyes watching me, unblinking. I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt as I passed her by without so much as a word. One evening, Sarah and I had a particularly wonderful date. We laughed, talked about our dreams, and I even dared to think that maybe, just maybe, this could turn into something real. As we stood outside my apartment, I invited her in for a drink. "I'd love to," she said, her eyes sparkling with that same warmth that drew me to her in the first place. Panic set in the moment we walked through the door. Ruby was still on the couch, and the last thing I wanted was for Sarah to see her. I mumbled some excuse and hurriedly shoved Ruby under the bed in my bedroom. It felt wrong, like I was betraying her, but I couldn't risk Sarah finding out. We settled on the couch, talking and laughing, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. But then I had to excuse myself to the bathroom. "I'll be right back," I told Sarah, planting a quick kiss on her cheek. When I returned to the living room, my world shattered. Sarah was slumped over on the couch, her neck at a grotesque angle, blood pouring from a deep gash across her throat. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't think. The room was spinning, and all I could do was stare at the horror before me. "Sarah." I choked out, rushing to her side, but it was too late. She was gone, her once warm eyes now staring lifelessly into nothing. I stumbled back, my mind racing. Who had done this? How? My eyes darted around the room, searching for answers, until I noticed it. A trail of blood leading away from the couch, across the floor, and into my bedroom. "No," I whispered, shaking my head in disbelief. "No, this can't be real." I followed the trail, my hands trembling, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. When I reached the bedroom, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle. I didn't want to go in, didn't want to see what was waiting for me. But I had to know. I pushed the door open and dropped to my knees. There under the bed was Ruby, her once pristine hands now stained with blood. And in her grip was a knife, its blade slick and red. Terror gripped me as I stared at her, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. "Ruby, what did you do?" I croaked, my voice barely audible. Her head turned slowly, unnaturally, until her black eyes met mine. There was something in those eyes now, something dark and malevolent that I hadn't seen before. The air in the room grew heavy, and I felt a coldness seep into my bones. "Ruby, no, this can't be happening," I stammered, backing away, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. The doll didn't move, but I could feel her gaze boring into me, a silent accusation that I couldn't escape. My mind raced, trying to piece together how this could have happened, but the answers eluded me. All I knew was that Sarah was dead, and the doll I had once loved was the reason. My heart pounded in my chest, a wild, erratic beat that echoed in my ears. I needed to get out, needed to run, but I was frozen in place, trapped by the horror before me. And then, as if to mock me, Ruby's lips began to move. At first it was just a twitch, a small, almost imperceptible motion. But then they parted, and a soft, rasping voice emerged, a voice that was not my own but something far more sinister. "You were mine, Dennis," the voice whispered, cold and accusing. "You promised me forever." I stumbled back, my hands fumbling for the door handle. I had to get out, had to get away from whatever this was. But as I turned to flee, the door slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls, trapping me inside. I was alone with her now, alone with the thing that had once been my comfort, my solace. But now she was something else entirely, something evil, something that had been waiting, biding its time. I didn't know, I pleaded, my voice shaking. "I didn't know you could. I'm sorry, Ruby, please, I'm so sorry." But there was no mercy in those black eyes, no trace of the companion I had once loved. Only cold, relentless malice. And as the darkness closed in around me, I realized the truth. Ruby had never been just a doll. She had been something more, something that had latched onto my loneliness, feeding off my need for connection. And now, she was going to make sure I never left her again. In the final moments, as the shadows deepened and the air grew thick with the scent of blood, I heard her voice one last time, a soft, mocking whisper that sent chills down my spine. "Forever, Dennis. You're mine forever."